This is AM Joy, February 2nd, 2019.
To declare a national...
I don't want to say, but you'll hear the State of the Union, and then you'll see what happens right after the State of the Union, okay?
Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Ted Lieu, who serves on the Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees of the United States House. Congressman, good morning.
Good morning.
So let's talk about this negotiation that's happening. The sense I have, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that House and Senate leadership in the two parties are pretty much negotiating over funding for the government without really Donald Trump having any involvement, because it feels like he's trying to force his way back into the conversation. Am I wrong about that?
You are not, and let me first say that having been elected to the Democratic House leadership team, I just want to say I can confirm what many people already know. Nancy Pelosi is a badass, and that's why we're doing so well in these negotiations, because we've been able to transform this discussion to talk about real border security, not about this stupid wall that is not going to really prevent the actual drugs that are coming through, because most of them come through ports of entry. We're going to make sure that we have effective, smart border security, not a vanity wall project.
Can you just answer, I mean, because this comes up, pretty much every time there is a Democrat sitting in a seat such as yours, and it's a question that gets asked really in every interview. Can you just clear up for those of us in the media and for the audience once and for all, is there any discussion at all about building a wall across the southern border? Is that at all in the realm of possibility?
So we have this conference committee of Republicans and Democrats, and there are discussions about additional physical barriers in some places, and we'll see how those discussions go. But the wall that Donald Trump envisions, that is not part of the discussion. And by the way, that was not part of the discussion for the last 2 years when Republicans controlled both houses of Congress. And here's the really simple truth. Most Republican legislators don't really care about this wall. This is not one of their priorities. That's why they didn't work on it for over 2 years.
Yeah, and it has become very clear that Donald Trump has a hard time getting anything that he wants that they don't already want. Let's go to this idea of a national emergency and a potential second government shutdown. And we know how the first one really harmed a lot of people. The Washington Post is reporting that Mitch McConnell, and the other body over in the Senate, is telling Donald Trump that any move to either shut the government down again or do a national emergency would trigger political blowback and divide the GOP, according to two Republicans with knowledge of the exchange. McConnell told Trump that Congress might end up passing a resolution disapproving of an emergency declaration, the people said, which would force the president to contemplate using his first veto ever in the face of opposition from his own party. Can you explain to me why it is that your colleagues on the other side of the aisle are so afraid of overriding a presidential veto? Why don't they just pass a bill? Why are we even having this discussion about a national emergency? Why don't they just pass a bill and make them veto it?
I think we might get to that point, and here's two reasons why Donald Trump hasn't declared a national emergency yet, because if he thought he could be successful, he would have done this 35 days ago. And the first, I'll do it by asking you and your viewers a simple question. Remember the last time that you or your family member had an emergency and then you waited 2 years plus an additional 3 weeks before going to the emergency room? No one does that. And factually, on the facts of national emergency, Donald Trump will lose in court. But here's a real reason why I think he doesn't want to do this. If he did this, he would get a one-time shot of between $5 to $7 billion, which would pay for about 1/10 of his wall. And all future appropriation bills, Congress will write in that you cannot use any of this funding for the wall, meaning he'll never get the rest of his wall built. So the only way he can do this to get his wall built is to negotiate with Congress and have a comprehensive immigration plan.
Well, let me very quickly switch topics with you, and let's talk about this withdrawal of the United States from the IMF treaty. I know you sit on the Foreign Relations Committee. Your thoughts about this idea of withdrawing the U.S. Now we've had the Russians say not only are they too going to withdraw, but they're going to restart their missile programs.
Right. So nuclear weapons and nuclear treaties can be very complicated, but there is one very simple truth, and that is this: no one wins a nuclear war. So the U.S. withdrawing from the INF treaty was a very bad idea. I've also introduced legislation with Senator Ed Markey that prevents the president from launching a nuclear first strike without first getting congressional authorization. Congress needs to exert its role in a much more forceful way, especially with Donald Trump in office.
All right, and lastly, sir, I want to give you an opportunity to weigh in. A lot of prominent Democrats calling on Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, to resign. What are your thoughts on the matter?
Governor Northam must resign. That picture in his yearbook is completely indefensible. It is incredibly racist. And I note that former Secretary of State Mike Ertel of Florida resigned for a picture of him being blackface. This is even worse. It's blackface next to a KKK figure. There's no way Governor Northam should remain in office.
All right, Congressman Ted Lieu, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And coming up, we're going to take a coffee break.